Okay, so job hopping. Inevitably, during a job interview, a question that may arise, especially for those of us who have a history of changing jobs, okay? The eventual question might come up as to job hopping, okay? And this term job hopping is quite subjective in my own opinion. For me personally and professionally, I believe that if you can establish that you have worked for an employer for a minimum of 2 years, I think that's a sufficient amount of time so that the question does not need to come up. I have had my own experience where even at the stage of career that I'm in, which is a mid-career level, okay, I still have potential employers asking me the question, oh, I see that you've been with so-and-so for 2 years and then 2.5 years. Can you explain to me a bit about why that is? Again, for me, I would find it surprising, but obviously the potential employer would like to know, and so I seek to answer it honestly. In my particular case, I have a history in a sector of financial services that is quite volatile. So I have been employed at 3 separate hedge funds. So a typical life cycle of a hedge fund is anywhere between 2 and 3 years. And so quite clearly in my own employment history, from the period from about 2005 until about 2015, you can clearly see a situation where I was employed with a given employer for about 2 years or so. And so in that situation, I'm very candid and upfront, and I say just that. Look, I'm in an area of financial services that's quite volatile. The average life cycle of a hedge fund is 2 to 3 years, and that's why I've had to look for a job every 2 to 3 years or so. And in that particular situation, that's a perfectly valid response. Now, there are other factors that come into play and that you have to consider that will apply to each of us individually. The question of job hopping, quite honestly, is more relevant when you are at an earlier stage of your career, when you're basically just starting out. If you are just starting out in your career, let's say your first 5 to 8 years of your career, for example, and the potential employer sees a lot of jobs, okay, and let's say that they are within that 2-year mark. It's a fairly understandable question for a potential employer to inquire, why have you been job hopping, basically, okay? And at that point it becomes a difficult question to answer in a manner where the potential employer would find it acceptable. Again, how you want to tackle this is you want to be honest, but you don't want to obviously paint yourself in a manner that will be negative in the eyes of the employer, okay? So you seek to answer it honestly. You seek to say, I tried it out for a year or so, let's say for example, I found the company was just not a fit for me, so I decided to move on. I think that the worst answer that a young careerist can give to this question is, oh, I moved for a larger salary. And the reason for that is because employers will take that response to mean that they're dealing with somebody who's potentially not committed to the long-term development of the company and to the long-term development of the employee within the company. So for all you young career people out there, please do be aware. I think the worst answer that you can give to the question about job hopping is that you're looking for a higher salary. Okay, it will tend to not be received very well. So try to stay away from that as an answer to your question. A perfectly legitimate question, and once again, answer rather to the question. A perfectly legitimate answer to the question is that you're seeking personal and developmental growth. Okay, but again, do be aware. When you provide an answer like this, you have to be honest. You have to be perfectly able to explain and develop your answer, because you better believe that the interviewer will follow up with you on this question. Well, what do you mean? What was it about the company that you found wasn't suitable for your personal or professional development? And at this point, you have to be very careful that you don't trash your former employer. Okay, you always reflect back on your past experiences in a positive manner, even if they were not necessarily positive. Okay, so the answer to why are you job hopping for a young career person is going to be more difficult to answer than for somebody at a more advanced stage of their career.